Let's take 1 more minute. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Right, looks like there are almost 30 participants, and I recognize some friendly names. Thanks for joining. So hello, good morning and good day, and welcome to our collaborative seminar, Kazakhstan and Environmental Policy. My name is Timur Alexandrov. I am a postdoc at the University of Cambridge, and also a graduate of both KIMEP and Cambridge, and it's a really pleasure to moderate today's meeting. So I'm pleased to tell that this is the very first collaborative seminar between Cambridge and KIMEP, and hopefully there'll be, of course, many more, ideally offline and online, once the planet is healthy again. And we hope that not only people from Cambridge and KIMEP joining us today, but also I see scholars who share an interest in Central Asian environmental challenges, in Kazakhstan and sustainability. So the purpose of this first joint seminar is to set a platform for interdisciplinary dialogue and share the knowledge base between the two universities and scholars of Central Asia. So we're happy to have experts today who work on topical issues like environmental policy, sustainable development, and ecological challenges. And we also have an update that unfortunately Dr. Chris White from KIMEP couldn't make it because of the COVID, and we really wish him a speedy recovery. So we've got 2 presentations focused on Kazakhstan and 1 on Central Asian environment. And before we dive in, I'd like to share some technicalities. I'd like to request everyone to keep your mics muted, and there is an option to share your questions and comments in the chat. Also, you can raise a hand once the speaker is done with presentation. So before we move on with presentations, I would like to introduce the organizers of today's event, Professor Vivienne Westbrook, a cultural historian, professor of English and Cultural Studies, and research director of the College of Humanities and Education at KIMEP University. And Vivienne also Lady Margaret Befor Fellow at St. John's College, Cambridge. And Dr. Siddharth Saxena, a principal scientist at Cambridge Cavendish Laboratory and the director of Cambridge Central Asia Forum. His sphere of work also includes knowledge systems, social and political development, religion, and he is a very knowledgeable expert in Central Asia and the Middle East. So now as an opening, I'd like to invite Professor Vivienne Westbrook to say a few words about this collaboration, and then to Dr. Saxena to say a few words about the background of Cambridge Central Asia Forum.
Hello, am I unmuted here? Can you hear me? Okay, good. First of all, I'm very grateful to Montu for allowing us to begin this great collaboration between Cambridge Central Asian Forum and KIMEP University. I know that there are quite a lot of people at KIMEP University who are very interested in environmental issues. And I'm the chair of the Environmental Research Association there, which allows people across the disciplines to collaborate on research, on developing new programs for students, of generating interest in the environment for the future. So we're very open to academics across the disciplines from across the world to joining us, and we hope that we'll have many more collaborations in the future with the Central Asian Forum.
Thank you, Professor Westbrook. Dr. Saxena, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm really grateful to both of you for putting the program together, but also Nick Ray, who actually put Viv and Central Asia Forum together. Nick Ray, one of our management committee members who's here with us today. And so, as has already been said, that this is the beginning of a relationship in a formal sense of organizing events. However, we have been really lucky to have had excellent products, I would say, of KIMEP coming and building research base here in Cambridge. And Timur Alexandrov is certainly one of the leading examples of that. But others, Diana Koda-Proganova, who just became a lecturer in this university recently. So this is really a kind of a very productive long-term engagement, which is now turning into a platform. As a way of introduction, what I thought I would do is to formally share a PowerPoint with you to say a little bit about what is Central Asia Forum, and how, particularly for our friends from KIMEP who are joining us for the first time, but others who have not heard about it institutionally, but have been very active in participating in our programs. So I'll share my screen with you shortly. Here we go. So let me see if I can. Okay, good. So this is Cambridge Central Asia Forum, and just quickly not to read these words, but simply say that our key focus is to bring the interests of anyone who is here in Cambridge, and actually for that matter anywhere in the world, to take interest in Central Asia. So it doesn't matter which discipline, it doesn't matter what period of time that you're looking at. Our objective is to get you interested in Central Asia. This would be particularly important to note because 30 years ago, when Central Asian countries became independent, there was a very sporadic interest in the region, and often disconnected. And we decided to bring together a platform which is agnostic towards subjects or disciplines, but more about the region, and that can range from understanding the mineral wealth to social issues, to global issues and global challenges like environment, food security, and similar things. So that's what Central Asia Forum's platform is and has been for nearly sort of 2 decades now. This is the makeup, and of course we have a website where you can of course read this up. So our management committee is chaired by Professor Lord Mayor, a very important academic, policy maker, and a thinker in this country who has kind of nurtured us as an institution when he was a Master of Jesus College. And then we have, of course, as you can see from the list here, that the wide variety of disciplines which are deployed in our management committee at Jesus College. But we also have an advisory committee across the university in different departments, and the whole list is not here, but on a website you can find. Similarly, I want to give you a flavor quickly of kind of research projects. So in a broad sense, we have 4 streams. So one stream is to do with projects and research which are coming from history, the manuscript work, Oriental studies, and area studies side of things. Second stream is more to do with the contemporary politics, sociology, economics, anthropology of the region. The third area is to do with science and technology projects, and the fourth is the interdisciplinary nature of things, the kind of thing that we're doing today, where things crisscross. So you can see from these, from documenting local knowledge in traditional environmental systems, this was a project funded by Christensen Fund. Then we have, of course, the social development in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization realm. So I'm just reading just randomly from here, and very, very important projects like earthquake and seismic security in the region. These are the kind of things that you will continue to hopefully witness and discuss during our other seminars. But then also we have a very active idea regarding building projects in the region itself. So not simply studying them in Cambridge, but actually on the ground with institutions and people. So that has largely happened in the technological innovation area, where we, for in Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and some other, how to say, connectivity within the region regarding how to manage technology and science talent, and how it can be deployed towards new industrial policies, how that impacts food and environmental security, so actually building laboratories or research groups within the region. Yeah? And indeed, there are publishing avenues which are very, very important. This is all kind of Central Asia Forum's efforts are institutionalized here in the Center for Development Studies, where we teach a course, a paper rather, on development in Central Asia and Caucasus, which is part of the Development Studies MPhil, a very popular course in the university, which then serves as a feeder to the PhD program. Of course, PhD program is open, to global applicants, and as we've seen with Timur and others who joined university from outside and continue to PhD programs. And through this MPhil program, we hope to encourage those who have never heard of the region before to get trained through the paper and then take interest in the PhD. We also host, of course, postdoctoral researchers and visiting interns, and where Kazakhstan has had like the largest lion's share. So we have had more than 40 Bolashak interns and scholars, but also from across the region. And I wanted to highlight at this point that we take pride in being able to keep the region connected here. So as the region last 30 years has own mindset about developing the countries and the regional borders and so on. So the generations which prior to 30 years ago were growing for his PhD did field work not only in Kazakhstan but also in Uzbekistan, and we encourage that kind of atmosphere, and we hope we can continue to do that in the future through these partnerships that we are discussing today. So I would stop here and hand it over back to Timur, and would be happy to answer questions in chat or talk to you separately.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saxena. Yes, so now it's time for our first presenter. This is Dr. Jamila Utarbayeva. Dr. Utarbayeva is an adjunct senior lecturer at KIMEP University, College of Social Sciences. She is also one of the founders of the network of experts for sustainable development in Central Asia. And she's also produced more than a dozen publications on the problems of sustainable development and ecological consciousness. So the paper titled Eco-Activism and the Conservation of Protected Areas in Kazakhstan. A quick reminder again, please keep muted and share your questions in the chat. And we'll have 10 minutes after the presentation, and each speaker will have 20 minutes of talk. Okay. Jamila, the floor is yours.
Yes. Thank you, Timur. Thank you, Vivienne. Thank you all for coming today. So I will share my screen. It's possible, Timur? Because it's like denied.
Yes, if you click share screen.
No, but it's okay.
Okay.
So my presentation is about eco-activism and conservation of protected areas in Kazakhstan. As like all the world knows, environmental problems are significant factors that have united the forces of civil society in Kazakhstan since the country's independence. And we have like a very well-known movement in our history. It's anti-nuclear movement, Nevada Semey. It was one of the first experiences of successful eco-activism or civic activism in Kazakhstan, and forming elements of the civil society. And one of the head of the leaders of this movement, so it was one of the greatest victory of civil society in Kazakhstan in the beginning of our independence. Then the activity of the public in solving environmental problems became less noticeable. But currently, eco-activism in Kazakhstan is experiencing. Eco-activism is one of the forms of soft protest that is available to the public of Kazakhstan in conditions when other forms of political protest are not available. It is driven by the middle class of Kazakhstan, the most educated and not indifferent public part of our society. So Kazakhstani eco-activism, and it's only like my subjective opinion, because there are a lot of people. But maybe I will be focused on people whom I know, whose activity I know. So one of them is Azhar Jandosova. She is public activist who has in business, in culture, working in culture, business in Kazakhstan. And now she is one of the most the influencer in this ecological activity. Also, the second maybe public activist, it's Saltanat Tashimova, who is now mostly focused maybe on the urban development of Almaty and our region to prevent air pollution or like non-healthy construction. Also, journalist and blogger Vadim Bareika and many others. And I met Azhar Jandosova recently, and I explained her that I will make presentation about her activity, including her activity. Now she will be involved in the working group for development of the change to the legislation on protected areas in Kazakhstan, and also on popularization of the like apple, because maybe many of you know that apple is a symbol of Almaty, because Alma is apple, translating from Kazakh. And also about like international maybe influence, we had expert and German expert and ecologist Dagmar Schreiber, who maybe was the influencer or maybe pioneer of people who attracted attention to Kokzhailau, conservation of our natural landmark near Almaty. She worked in Kazakhstan for many years, and even because of her some like this activity, she even has some like recommendation from the embassy of Germany to stop her like this ecological activity in Kazakhstan. So one of the greatest movement in Kazakhstan was and is Save Kokzhailau. So here you see a picture of Kokzhailau by our also well-known photographer Dionysy Mit. And you see like this very unique place, and in order to protect this place from mid-2010s, this movement Save Kokzhailau was established. And if to translate Kokzhailau from Kazakh, it's a heavenly pasture land. It's a unique 1,000 hectare natural landmark between the small and large Almaty gorge near Almaty, as you know, the largest city in Kazakhstan and our former capital. Now it's again part of Ili Alatal National Park. But in the times when it was like, in the time when the movement started to work in Kazakhstan, it was it was taken off from the Alataw National Park, and there was a plan to build a ski resort in this area. And why it's important? Because Kokzhailao is the habitat of many rare and relict animals, plants, including snow leopard, mountain tulips, white apple, and other vulnerable or rare species. And many people with different backgrounds and professions united to stop the planned construction of the ski resort in there. The main idea was keep Kokzhailao wild and do not damage biodiversity, as many scientists insisted that they are lungs of the megapolis of Almaty. As I told earlier, it was the Ilya-Alataw State National Park, but in 2010 it was moved all from the protected area territory for the construction of the resort. So, and the confrontation between like eco-activists, business, and governmental structures lasted for about 7 years. And the date of 29th of October 2019, when the president of Kazakhstan, Alexandrov, banned the construction of the Kokzhailao resort, would be considered as the bright day and of the still weak civil society of Kazakhstan. And of course, it was like next serious victory of eco-activism in Kazakhstan. And so I stopped on like two cases, and one of them Kokzhailao, and the second is in the western part of Kazakhstan. In 2020, last year, it became known about plans to build a boutique hotel near the famous Fangs landmark on Ustyurt Plateau. This fact become a new impetus for strengthening of eco-activism. Many eco-activists of the Kokzhailao movement, having experience in achieving their goals, switched their efforts on unique bourgeois in the desire to leave it wild and without construction of hotels, which could disrupt the ecosystem of the place. And whom I mentioned earlier, like Azhar Jandosova, Vadim Bareyko, also now it's like in the front of this eco-activism in this area. So it's my picture because recently in March I was in Aktau and also visited this very unique place near Ustyurt National Reserve. And so I saw these places by my own eyes, so they are really incredible, and really I think they need conservation. The bourgeois landmark belongs to the Karakia district of the Mangistau region and is located 300 kilometers from the regional center Aktau. It is not in the protected Ustyurt Reserve, how we call it, Zapovednik now, unfortunately, because like access is free, and yeah, because of very maybe quite low level of culture, unfortunately, many roads, places near these unique landmarks are very polluted with waste, and I also saw it myself. This section of the Ustyurt Plateau represents vast desert landscapes of limestone deposits, ornamental rocks, 250 meters high, named Fangs. So you see the picture, I took this picture from internet, it's not mine. It is a place where it's possible to find the remains of fossilized shells, sea urchins, cephalopods, belemnites, and even teeth of prehistoric sharks from the times of the Mesozoic ocean phases. It's also my own picture from my last trip. Of course, it's not very good quality. In place of the ancient ocean, limestone outliers and canyons appeared, which is now one of the pearls and visiting cards of Mangistau and of Kazakhstan as a whole. There are archaeological monuments in the tract from the Paleolithic to the early Middle Age ages. And this unique and wild area was known to raise a narrow circle of tourists, mainly from Russia. By the way, like because it was in Soviet times, it was closed territories, secret territories. So it was not open to the broad public, and only now they are becoming more and more famous. And the current situation with construction of the hotel is not clear. Eco-activists had interim victory. The hotel will be not built close to Bozhira, but anyway, the construction plans are still valid. So at least there are a lot of things to do for eco-activism. So it's probably a new destination where eco-activism will prove its soft power, and I believe will get the real result. And some maybe my own thoughts and conclusions. What benefits and challenge to be eco-activist in Kazakhstan? Being an eco-activist in Kazakhstan does not bring any dividends. It is rather underrated volunteer service. Representatives of the construction industry, businesses see eco-activists as almost enemies. They destroy their businesses, their business plans, and maybe sometimes they do not so much concerned about their damage to the environment. In general, representatives of eco-activism are now one of the strata of the society respected by public opinion. And so now also one of the important role of eco-activists is to educate people on their own example. Of course, all of us know Greta Thunberg. And I think that she shows a great inspiration example to our young generations. And I believe that things will be changed in Kazakhstan also. And also maybe some sociological conclusions. So eco-activism is a real force in emerging economics as Kazakhstan. And it helped to reach a consensus between urgent issues of environmental protection also, between authorities, business, and society. Eco-activism is a current soft power in the countries with limited democracies, because, of course, if you would like to protest against, I don't know, maybe land court, or maybe some anti-governmental aims, so the meetings will be not allowed, will be banned. But with this activism activities still allowed, even from a very high distances, like our president told that activism is very important. And social media, and mainly Facebook, are the main channels for informing people about these eco-activism activities and finding like-minded people. But vice versa, also social media also could play not good role for conservation of natural landmarks, because, for example, now many people in Kazakhstan, in order to make videos or pictures for Instagram or YouTube, they go to the protected areas like in KIMPEP and other, make pictures, maybe scare like people because we have space of flamingo and other birds. So like in order to make like good picture, nice picture, so like this social media has two sides. Eco-activism became a school of new leadership and formed new public opinion leaders, not only like those whom I mentioned earlier before, but also like new generation of opinion makers. And also, when I prepared to this presentation, I noticed that the issues of eco-activism are not yet a subject of research. The materials are scattered, mainly publication in social networks and the like media, newspapers, sites, but not like still not very detailed and deep research on these topics. So I believe that it will, I and maybe other people will develop it further. So thank you for your attention. It was nice to be here with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tabaeva. That's a really interesting talk and fantastic images, of course. And the grassroots environmental groups are really a sign of a shaping civil society in the area. So this is time now for questions. You're welcome to share them in the chat or just raise the hand and you can unmute yourself. Well, I forgot to mention that we also have our discussant, Professor Vivienne Westbrook. So okay, she can also share her comments on the topic.
Timur, I can start while people are articulating their thoughts, if you like. Thank you, Julia. It was an excellent presentation. I would like to sort of raise a discussion point. So in terms of when we're looking at the images of the wonderful nature, and then we're looking at the how I say the threat posed to it by construction of facilities and objects and so on. To raise a discussion to the level where activism plays a constructive role in terms of local development, meaning that it's very clear that these natural sites need to be preserved, and they need, the best solutions need to be found how we sustainably develop them as well. So is there any sense within the eco-activist movement in Kazakhstan about also working with local communities or to seek alternative solutions for development, different ways of building livelihoods which are synergetic with nature, with long-term preservation, rather than simply being opposed to development that comes. So the opposition is well founded, but then does it leave the local communities in a lurch? So is there a thought process regarding this within the movement?
Thank you for your question. Of course, like whom I mentioned, there is this moderate, like eco-activists. They are not radical, and they know that ecotourism development is very important because all people would like to see these beauties. And also, of course, ecotourism could bring profit to the local population, to the communities. And they, for example, if to take Bozhira, the west of Kazakhstan, so they propose like different locations and maybe development of all facilities to develop like cities like Zhanaozen, which is not far from Bozhira, and make only tours, of course, educate guides, people, make well-organized, not damaging tours to this place, only just to see and go. So like one of the examples. And of course, they are trying to work with local governments because of course, we know that not only Kazakhstani people, but also foreign people should see our real nice landmarks. And so I think this combination of activities of local population, government, business will bring their benefits in the future. But the role of eco-activists also to attract attention and to show the problem, to attract expert opinion, and so I think like this.
Thank you.
Okay.
I mean, really, just to follow up on that, I had a similar question. It was good to know that Stambozova is involved in working groups. I wondered if those were working groups that were the government policymakers, are they? Because I was also wondering to what extent the eco-activists in Kazakhstan are actually proactive or reactive. And of course, it would be great to see much more collaboration and much more proactive agency in environmental policies, so that anything that affected the environment had at least one representative from the environment fighting for it. So I just wondered if you were hopeful that perhaps in the next decades, given the pressure that Europe is also under to help Kazakhstan to develop environmental policies, whether you see this as a way forward, whether you think that there's a likelihood that environmentalists will actually become recognized and acceptable at the government level.
Mm-hmm. As I know, Ajar Jandosova, she is like really open to work with governmental structure. She's she entered to the public groups on the development of the not development, but like change and amendments to the law on protected areas, and also she like not only she, but people like she, of course, will work on this. And if to evaluate how they are reactive or proactive, maybe, I don't know, of course, it's only my opinion. I think it's a combination of proactiveness and reactiveness. Of course, they suggest some new initiatives, but also maybe could react on something what happens also. And also having experience and being in many like foreign countries, Ajar, she saw how it works in different countries, because these places like Bozhira, they are similar to, for example, Arizona in the US, and she was there also. And so of course they are trying to maybe introduce international experience and be on the top of this expert opinion. How do you think? So I see question.
Oh yes, we've got a question from Rustam Atajanov. Please, Rustam.
Thank you very much, dear Timur. Thank you for your excellent presentation, dear Jamila, if I may. My own academic interests right now, they're not directly focused on environmental law, but I'm becoming more and more interested in this area. Also, maybe it is added by the fact that I'm an amateur paleontologist. So I grew up on Ustur. So the moment you said Bozhirao and Mangostau, I became even more interested in this. You mentioned in your presentation an interim victory by eco-activists in the case of Bozhirao. And I was just wondering, dear Jamila, could you please tell us more on the methods that were used by eco-activists and whom they talked to, I mean, with business developers or the government in order to make sure that the construction for the moment would stop for some time? I was just wondering how exactly they work. Yeah, thank you.
So, like the interim victory, it was because now it's planned, like construction of the hotel is moved on 4 kilometers from the like first planned location. So, but the construction is still not banned, and probably it could be. Mainly they work also like, as I told, it's the maybe main space for informing is Facebook, and they organize it, petition.
Okay.
Petition about saving Bozhirao, so involving of broad public, and everybody could sign this online petition. And also working also with eco-activists, local eco-activists in Mangistau Oblast, and so, and also with local population, but local population, of course, because of it's like rural areas, no many sources like for income. So some of them were really impressed by the fact that it will be construction of the hotel. They see like new places, new working places. And they try to work with them, explain that like for future objectives, it's better to keep these places wild, because like for international tourists who would like to see these places, it's better to keep them like conserved in still wild conditions, with of course with some infrastructure to get them. To have visiting places. And, yeah.
So there was local resistance to the public pressure, right? As far as I understand. Okay.
Thank you, Rustam. If you are interested, maybe later after like lockdown, we can like discuss it also.
Yeah, I would love to. The ancient ocean thetis that you mentioned, it's from Mesozoic. It's a unique place. I believe it must be safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we've got one more question. So we've actually got time for a couple of questions. So Baghdad Alimhankaza is asking whether you're researching a foreign country experience. And if yes, so which countries? Maybe you could share a little bit?
Because like my dissertation, when I studied at our Kazakh National University, and I defended my dissertation on social and political factors of forming of environmental consciousness in Kazakhstan. So I mainly focused on the US experience and European experience, but if to stop on like this my current research, so I did not compare with other countries. I just tried to show Kazakhstani experience and how it is now.
Great, thank you. Any more questions?
I think Nick Ray had a question.
All right.
Nick.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. Very interesting. I had a question about the KIMEP University, which you come from, but as far as I can see, I'm an architect, and of course I have an interest in these things, and landscape is very, very important. Relationship of new city building to landscape, very important. And I noticed that KIMEP doesn't seem to have faculties of that kind, and I think that's the way in which environmental activism would really have an immediate benefit, because if you begin to grow faculties which have those connections between both the social sciences and construction, business of building and so on, architecture and landscape architecture and city building, urban design are disciplines which combine those things. So that's where I would see some hope, where that idea of activism could have a real benefit. But I don't know enough about the politics of your university to see whether that's a possibility. But that, I think, you can show an environmental benefit, and I think in the end, a commercial benefit to faculties of that kind being integrated into university.
Thank you. Yes, we don't have this faculty, but we have public administration department and some courses in public administration. It's about urban development, also about some courses on environment and urban planning, on health administration. So yes, of course, it would be great to have the faculty, and maybe our administration will decide to create in the future.
Perhaps if you join the Research Association, Nick, you can exert that influence from within.
I'd be happy to do so, yes.
Let's take one more question from Evan Simpson, please.
Hi, it's more a comment than a question. It's nice to see some former colleagues. Nicholas, you raised the point of developing architectural profession. Unfortunately, architecture here is basically construction engineering still. It doesn't pay much attention, with a few exceptions, to the wider context. In fact, there is no profession of urban or regional or town and country planning as we would understand it. If you came to Almaty, it would be a professional insult to you to see it. It is to me, because my background is urban development and regeneration originally. When I was at KIMEP, a long time ago now, in 2005, we set up a centre for sustainable urban futures, and it went precisely nowhere because nobody had any interest at the time. The point, Jamelia, in your presentation, it's good to see Kokchai, the campaign, being given some recognition. Sadly, it's the exception rather than the rule in terms of actual impact. I think it would be fair to say, given that, and one of my colleagues here, where I am now at Narhaz University in Almaty, will join us later. He runs a Sustainable Development Research Institute. It would be fair to say that, it's a very marginal activity in reality, but that reflects the rest of the lack of development of a civil society here. There is no engagement. I've been involved in civic engagement projects for the last 15 years in Almaty. All of them are good as far as they go, but they don't get that far. There are some people in the public sector that have attempted to move things forward, but honestly, environmental considerations and people considerations tend to come fairly low on the list in terms of priorities in the Almaty region, at least. And one last point, it's ironic that probably the best examples of environmental activism and actual action you'll probably find in West Kazakhstan, and they're financed by the oil company, the international oil companies, because they have to meet their international corporate social responsibility obligations. So it's kind of depressing and ironic. But positive note, I'm going to have to leave, but positive note that I would say is that there's a huge wellspring of interest and enthusiasm among young people. We've run an ecology program here in Narhaz for years. The interest and demand is very, very high. But the school generation, my family's generation, they're disgusted by the environmental situation in Kazakhstan. I think it's fair to say. They want to recycle, they can't, there's no infrastructure. It goes on and on. So I think it's a generational thing. They see it coming down the road in a way that we don't really care about it, because frankly, we'll all be dead. But the education system really does not support any kind of integrated planning of anything. And the education system is completely specialized across the board. Some programs provide a little bit with, a few courses here and there, but ecology is ecology, architecture is construction engineering, then there's engineering, and there is no such discipline as regional planning or town and country planning as we would understand it. So the education system has failed in that respect. We tried way back when. Lots of people keep trying, it doesn't get anywhere. Because there is no employment opportunity for people. Why should we study something which is supposed to be professionally oriented when there is no profession? Thanks very much for allowing me to come today.
Thank you for your comment, yes.
Can I make a brief comment about Ewan's point? I have been to Kazakhstan several times, and I've experienced the enthusiasm of those students. I met groups who were, and we were talking about transportation system, I mean, the crazy arrangement of how you come in from the airport and so on. And they were knowledgeable and enthusiastic. And my hope is that an argument can be mounted, which can be economic argument. You don't want to import Western architects and planners because they do irresponsible things. I've witnessed some of them, and I won't go into detail, but you need to develop your own, and there's a real strong business case for doing that.
Right, so if we have no more questions, I think it's time to move to our second speaker. And I would like to invite Dr. Jen von Budre-Park. She's an associate professor in international relations at KIMEP University in Almaty. She is also the author of 2 books on regional environmental politics in Northeast Asia and identity policy and prosperity of the Korean diaspora in Northeast China. And Dr. Park is also an alumna of Cambridge University's master's program on environmental policy. And her presentation is titled Europe's Policy Towards the Central Asian Environment in the Era of the Renewed Great Game. Dr. Park, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Timur. I'm going to share with you my presentation file first. Okay, can you see the PPT? Great, yeah, great. Okay, thank you so much for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to talk about this topic. Actually, this is a just small part of one of my ongoing research projects, doing together with 2 of my local colleagues here at KIMEP. And the project is actually on regionalization of Central Asia, which has been shaped by the interactions between the region and major external powers, including the European Union. But I should confess, this is rather at a very earlier stage. So it's going to be more like an interim research note than a complete thematic coherent research piece. So before I start, I also have to say that our analysis is more at the regional level. So the EU here, I mean the supranational multi-level governance, which can be understood in between a federal state and intergovernmental organization. And well, I started to think about this topic because I've been living in Almaty for 3 years now, and having talked to many people around me, including my colleagues and students, I just felt that the local people here begin to have some kind of concerns about the gradual withdrawal of the Western powers in this region, either perceived or real, particularly the US withdrawal and EU as to a lesser degree. So I'm going to briefly discuss Europe's changing role in Central Asia, trying to connecting it with the environmental development here, and some cases that show recent developments as kind of outcome of desirable interaction between the EU and CA in the environmental policy making process. And in the final section, I will just briefly discuss political and environmental implications of the EU's shifting policy priority. So first of all, so why does Central Asia need the European Union? So there's one analysis shows that this is kind of like general view, I would say. It's still very important to CA, at least the main three reasons. One is Europe is seen as a more value-driven alternative to other powers like Russia and China. And the belief in EU's emphasis on social and economic development and promoting regional cooperation. So all 3 points are closely linked, of course, with environmental development, especially given that the environmental issues take rather lower priority in Russia and China's developmental agenda in the region. And so regardless of the public perception, anyhow, still the EU officially focuses very much on education. We talked about environmental education. I also believe that education is a very important tool. And environmental cooperation under the EU Green New Deal framework and human rights dialogue and promotion of regional cooperation. So what exactly can EU offer for the large-scale development, environmental development for this region? So an example, some example is all related to policy design, especially like emission trading system and clean energy development and providing climate funds, given that the EU is a provider of 40% of the world's public climate finance. Well, actually, the map shows the EU's presence in each CA countries, but as I mentioned, my analysis is more on the regional level. And in our book, we, of course, include some analysis of individual European member countries, EU member countries, and CA member countries. Okay, right. There are some challenges. Important challenges, but I also think that they can be an opportunity to be engaged more at the same time. Mainly it's linked with the industrial structure of Central Asian countries. They are heavily reliant on energy intensive economic activities and external trade at the same time. So the EU is the second highest trading partner of the CA region after China and before Russia. For example, 80% of EU imports from Kazakhstan are oil products. And Turkmenistan is becoming very significant suppliers for natural gas. And also after hydrocarbons, the nuclear sector constitutes a major portion, which involves uranium mining, which is one of the dirtiest and the most environmentally harmful industry, together with the rising emphasis on the military sector for industrial development since 2007, which is also very closely linked with carbon intensive mining and energy intensive manufacturing. Okay. And so from EU side, what is EU's strategy for the region? So EU as a government body has developed its own strategy and policy guidelines, according to which it emphasis has been a little bit shifting or modified. So overall, it's from energy security to hardcore security issues because of rise or re-rise of other powerful countries influencing heavily the region. And Yeah, I'm not going to go over everything, but this is well, I found that one useful research monograph entitled Environmental Policy in the EU, published in 2013, explored in detail the development of environmental guidelines in accordance with the overall EU legal framework. And a relevant point here is the inclusion of EU and beyond in implementing the Sustainable Development Agenda more actively and explicitly since the late 2000s. So we can notice some renewed interests from the EU side. One example is the renewed interest of EU in CA is demonstrated through the series of policy adjustments, which includes the EPCA with Kazakhstan in 2015 and so recently 2019 with Kyrgyzstan. And now, so and then I'm going to, in the second part, I'm going to briefly just introduce some examples of effective engagement. Well, the policy outcome is different from actual implementation, and it's different from actual environmental effectiveness. But as a top-down approach, this is a kind of like important changes. It would give more opportunities for engagement. Right. Yes. So one interesting example was after the Lisbon Treaty for 2007 and 2009, the direction of the EU's environmental policy was more clearly outlined, moving toward the direction of more legal and power sharing, institutional, and more democratic features. And here are the examples. One is convergence with EU environmental legislation. And well, this was it started in 2003. And in 2007, Kazakhstan, for example, could complete an environmental code. And recently, this year, Kazakhstan government has announced that there's an updated version of Kazakhstan's Environmental Code 2021. It has been completed with the help of European Union and the OECD's many years of research and engagement in this region. And there's a dialogue, RECOUP, the EU Central Asia Policy Dialogue on Environment and Climate Change, Circular Economy in Focus. It was actually initiated by Italy and under the broader EU's vision of the European Green Deal. And the third example is the water, the Central Asia Water and Energy Program. And also one interesting important project is clean mining, initiated since 2009, and EU has been engaged in decontaminating uranium legacy sites in Central Asia, invested 41 million euros to support plans with the Kyrgyz Republic, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan on 7 high priority uranium legacy sites. So these were the, and I listed the recent updates. The first one I mentioned already, and some update is the European support for Central Asian green recovery after COVID-19, and also supporting the entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs in Central Asia, incorporating environmental issues. Okay. So in the final section, I'm going to discuss the implications of the shifting EU's role in Central Asia for the environmental development. From my research, I found that there's a mixed perception about EU's diminishing role in the region. Yeah, but general sentiment is that EU's presence is healthier comparatively for the longer term societal development, which is very essential for environmental development. And also as a balance checking roles and taking greater responsibilities, hopefully, for the society as a whole, compared with other powerful forces. And so one explanation is that the whole framework is changing from aid to cooperation, which requires more proactive engagement from Central Asia. And this is one of the reasons why EU is perceived as mere a business facilitator, seeing the different aspects of the European Union, whereas the norm-based public-minded EU is viewed to be withdrawing from the Central Asian region. And yeah, so environmental implications include the increasing role and responsibilities for private sector. So the policy framework should be shifted as well toward more voluntary basis rather than top-down centralized regulatory approach. And there's a, well, linking with the first feature, there are some hurdles and societal level restrictions imposed by the Central Asian governments. And due to the increasing regulatory restrictions, for European private firms, the cost to invest in Central Asia becoming very high, so less profitable. So to public eyes, maybe the presence of European Union is retreating. But private sector engagement, I would say this can be an opportunity to cooperate at private sector level. But of course, government role is still very important to protect public goods, obviously, like environmental benefits. And the third point is EU's conventional approach of promoting multilateralism is slightly shifting to combining with bilateralism, with the recognition of the great diversity of the region. And that gives more room for the member countries to be engaged separately, bilaterally. Especially Germany and Italy are very keen to promote environmental issues in Central Asia. And fourth point is their overall shift from soft to pragmatic approach. If the previous approach included more norm-based, say like democratization, Europeanization, liberalization, then now it has been shifting to more pragmatic and more comprehensive approach, including hardcore security concerns. And yeah, the fifth point is the coalition with China with avoidance of norm competition. And while there are mixed views on this, so this could be good for peace and stability of the region. But there are some questions about the long-term sustainable development in the region and development in quality. Yeah, the last part is about the barriers. Well, we can think about the fundamental barriers to going toward more norm-based engagement is from Central Asian side. Barrier could be the elites, the resistance, because of their own interest in the region, preserving the system of patrimonial authoritarian rule that has allowed them to monopolize politics and commerce. And from EU side, many observers have discussed about the internal problems, intra-regional problems within the European Union. Especially the barriers have stemmed from the EU's aims and priorities are contradicting one another. and also lack the means to resolve internal contradictions. And also the common view is that EU's policy has remained torn between these different approaches, especially visibly prioritize energy and security over any long-term values, like implementing long-term values abroad. Yeah, but I also want to mention that EU's strategy goes more comprehensive, but not necessarily marginalizing Central Asia or in less developed areas. The EU's strategy is going more comprehensive engagement, connecting issues more horizontally. Well, I'm going to finalize my talk with just quoting one of our interviewees who had an optimistic view about the Western influence in this region. He says, "I do not believe that the withdrawal of the Western powers took place. The presence of the West has been preserved. On the horizon of my vision, it has moved to another level, and its presence is more and more hidden from public eyes." So he wanted to emphasize that the values and norms are embedded, and there's more perceived withdrawal than actual. Yes, there's a more hope to have better, more proactive engagement from both sides. This is all that I prepared for today, and if you have any questions and comments, I'd be happy to share.
Thank you, Dr. Park. Yes, we've got already a question from Dr. Saxena. I would like to take one.
Thank you, Timur. Thank you for laying out the EU Central Asia, background of the history. This is a topic of interest within our both in Cambridge circles, but also as a project that we work called Campus Project with our partners in Kent. But I would like to, in a way, critically put some points on the table of how we think about these things. So, starting with backwards from your presentation, from the value side of things. So, the first very important thing that we like to question is that an idea that Central Asia / Kazakhstan somehow is a broken space which needs values to be imported to fix it, and somehow the notion that a external hand is needed, whether Eastern or Western, to play a guiding role in how the politics, environment, society emerges and synergy between them. It's something quite problematic from how we see things. Equally, we would say that when we say West or EU, it's also assuming that there is a kind of uniform so-called Western value system which is relevant. Given the fact we've seen what has happened with COVID, but before that, the divisions between American, British, European, the Brexit, the number of different things that are there, which point to that lack of coherent. I mean, we believe it's never been there, but these things have shown that they don't exist. But more fundamentally, what is interesting, however, on the positive side, is that EU is EU, and it has its pros and cons, but it has largely worked in a positive sense for itself. But its values are not necessarily relevant, and they cannot be imposed elsewhere or simply digested. However, what is important is the mechanisms through which consensus was reached. So not the values, but the value generation mechanisms and institutions are perhaps more important place for collaboration, where a comparison can be made, or countries of Central Asia or countries within Central Asia can see that they have a possible sort of mechanism through which they can generate their own set of values which work for them. And I would like to very much emphasize that particular thing. Why I say this, connecting back to the original theme of the environmental aspect. So what are the issues? There are structural issues in how the engagement of external, particularly Western and European countries, has worked with Central Asia. So there are contradictions. Contradictions are as following. The thing you mentioned about clean mining, that's an example from the thing. So the overall objective still remains to procure cheap, clean, and unquestionable, meaning questioned by the European value system or other international norms, energy products from the region. So extractive potential of the region is enhanced, and equally selling back to the region ready products and ready technologies back. So this is a structural thing which is stuck in the Western mind, I would emphasize very forcefully, to extract from the region and sell back to the region, rather than locally develop, co-develop both institutional strengths, diversification of energy, value add at the local level, which creates local jobs, creates local workforces, is something that is very peripheral to European policy. I'm not saying that's not intended. I just simply think structurally it's not understood. So the goodwill is there, but understanding of how to go about, because EU or Western world is still stuck very much in trying to procure cheap energy and sell its product back into the region, and region to buy those products from the oil money that has come in, that structurally places certain groups and elites in a particular privileged position, and this sort of disenfranchises the further populations. So that is a problem largely of the EU policy currently, but also I would say Western, and not only Western, I would say general external engagement with the region. So I will stop there because it's a topic we can continue for several hours or maybe several days to discuss piece by piece.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. I'll take it as a comment. Yeah, obviously, well, I didn't emphasize that much, but of course, I also think that the interaction is more important. As I briefly mentioned, the CA countries should be more proactively cooperating. And also, I didn't mean to say that all norms or values from outside, especially the European Union or Western part or more developed areas, should be helpful for the region. Of course not. Yeah, I'm only talking about environment, and of course there are things to learn from the previous experience, because EU is definitely, European countries are definitely known as most developed in terms of environmental development, and they have money and they have technology, so there are much to share with developing countries. So it's not really about the whole norms, like imposing like Westernization or Europeanization is desirable. I'm not saying that, and only environmental field, there are much to learn and cooperate. And because of the, as you rightly mentioned about the industrial structure, mining, obviously, they should be engaged, and Central Asian countries have to sell. So that's very important, it's crucial. But the question is how to extract, if there's any way to mitigate the carbon emission. But who has the technology? Says the European Union has more, better position to transfer their technology and share. And also the government, not only private sectors, but the government. Well, I also share the neoliberal perspectives that you just mentioned, the mutual cooperation and mutually beneficial way to do the business. So government role is still very important. Yeah. And institutional alignment is very important. That was one of the reasons why I mentioned the code, the environmental code, sort of like part of like efforts of convergence, not harmonization, but like partial alignment is very important, I think.
Yeah, just two things. I didn't say that was but I was talking about EU policy often comes with this emphasis on value transfer.
Right.
One, and the second thing I wanted to clarify is that I think neoliberal issues are a problem rather than a solution. But again, we can discuss more. But let's put this to other question. Timur, over back to you.
Yes, thank you. We've got a question from Neil Carmichael. He's wondering whether the case that the EBRD, unlike EU and US policies and other sources of green finance, have not changed their priorities. Neil, you can actually elaborate on this live if you want. Oh, I see. Okay. So have you read, Dr. Park, have you seen this comment in the chat?
Yeah, it's from Neil, right?
Yes, so he's wondering that EU and US politics may be refocusing due to COVID and other priorities, but whether EBRD and other sources of green finance haven't changed.
Right. But interestingly, they have been even more like reconsolidated the green policy as part of recovery of COVID-19. And they have actually increased the investments in green technology and infrastructure. And also related to this, one notable point is that there's more cooperation between EU and US for the region, the Central Asian region, because of their common interest in security fields to confront China and balance against Russia. And also, yeah, Japan is also on board. They are making something equivalent to BRI, Blue Dot Network, by which the Western countries want to redraw the regional map, including Central Asia, to integrating Central Asia to Indo-Pacific, obviously to exclude Russia and China. And an environmental issue has been together with like intellectual property and human rights, environment is one of those areas the Western countries use as a tool to persuade more cooperation and more engagement, as a tool to be engaged more in developing countries, including Central Asia.
Thank you. Professor Westbrook, maybe you have a comment.
Yeah, well, I have some of the same concerns actually. The EU is playing an increasing role in Kazakhstan's environmental policy making. But I just wondered what those implications were for collaborations long term, given that the EU has its own problems. And I think there's probably the real need for a political will to generate Kazakhstan's own environmental infrastructure for any of this money to be truly a long-term investment in Kazakhstan's environmental policies. And I know that the EU Switch Action Plan to accelerate transition to the green economy is a great initiative. But really, how is it all going to be implemented? And how reasonable are the goals that are attached to the money? So for instance, I know that Kazakhstan has said that it aims to be carbon neutral by 2060. So how realistic is this based on what you've seen of Kazakhstan's economic relationship with the US and with EU?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, it's a very difficult question. And yeah, well, Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan have been moving to more like middle income countries. So started to be excluded from the aid recipients, official ODA recipients in the OECD dark list. So that implicates that these countries should not rely on what EU does for their own country, but these countries should be ready to what they want to do, how proactively use external money for their own environments and for the environmental development. well, for example, in Kazakhstan, the government has been very much focused on the changing the transport system, because that's one of the most polluting areas, polluting sector. And also they're very much interested in developing renewable energy sources, and also nuclear plant construction, because there's a perception that nuclear, well, believe it or not, there's a perception that the nuclear energy is more efficient and less polluting.
Yeah,
all,
I suppose I just wonder how practical all of that is really, given that Kazakhstan is a major mining country. Oil, gas, uranium, as you say, they're not particularly clean fuels, and a 2060 carbon zero goal seems, to me at least, to be extremely, shall we say, ambitious.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. As I said, I mean, the industrial structure, it's not easy to change overnight, right? And the business should keep going before changing the entire the energy system, transforming the energy architecture. But I think all efforts should go hand in hand. So there are many ways to mitigate the pollution level, the emission, the carbon emission level in the mining sector, while gradually reducing the mining industry, together with the development in renewable energy sector. And so for renewable energy sector, of course, the EU's cooperation is very important. It's very essential. And also, EU has the European Union has much experience in how to transform these mining fields to some other industries. So if the Central Asia wants, if Kazakhstan wants, then it's possible. But I think all the measures should be going together in parallel, rather than for a certain period we focus on renewable energies and then goes on other. It's not working like that. So yeah, I think all the efforts, all levels of efforts should go hand in hand.
Yeah,
to effective move.
Yeah, I think you're right, and it's, as Mantu said, it's most important that the mechanisms, the strategies are being developed from the ground up rather than simply being imported from outside, absorbed, because only then will there be a real responsibility and commitment to maintaining them, I think.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Park. Do we have 1 minute for a quick comment from Nina Kruglikova? She's interested in any environmental cooperation with China if it takes place, and she's asking what are mechanisms and principles. Nina, you can actually elaborate on that very quickly. We've got 1 minute.
Right. Yeah, that's really good question. I did a lot of research on Northeast Asia, the environmental cooperation and conflicts in Northeast Asia. And China has been developing a very, very sophisticated policy, and it has, I think, it has one of the best the institutional arrangements in terms of environmental development. But before that, over the last few decades, China has been intensively cooperating with the European Union in all aspects of environmental sector. So China really observed all the the best practices in the European Union. But the question is whether that could be expanded to their economic activities abroad. That is another question. But obviously in Central Asia at the moment, China has been much more interested in economic development excluding other issues intentionally, like security issues. Well, we discussed about the anti-terrorism, anti-separatism, but beyond that, not much social issues or soft power issues yet. Yeah.
Right, okay. Thank you, Dr. Park. Thank you so much for your insightful presentation. I think it's time for our last but not least speaker. This is Dr. Maria Baiderdinova. She's assistant professor at KIMEP University, School of Law. Maria teaches a course, the first university course on animal law ever introduced in Kazakhstan. And she's also legal consultant of several animal protection NGOs. And her paper is titled Wildlife Protection Legislation in Kazakhstan. Maria, you're welcome to share the screen. Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you see the screen? Can you see my PowerPoint? Great. Well, I see that the time which has remained for my presentation is slightly less than for previous speakers, so I will try to keep it short and to the point. My presentation regards wildlife protection legislation in Kazakhstan. As Timur absolutely correctly represented me, I'm a lawyer. I did not know whether the moderator would have done that or not, so I prepared this introductory slide about myself. I'm an assistant professor at KIMPEP University at law school. I'm an expert member of an organization which is called Global Animal Law Association. So I'm underlining that I'm a lawyer. I'm not animal protection activist, or I'm not an ecologist or zoologist. I'm a lawyer who works in this field. I'm a member of Animal Law Committee of a Chamber of Legal Consultants, KASBAR, where in cooperation with my colleagues, we work on draft law, which is now in the Parliament of the Republic of Kazakhstan, draft law on responsible treatment of animals. And also I'm a pro bono consultant. This is my practical experience. Is in the sphere of also of animal protection. I'm consulting different animal protection NGOs. The outline of my presentation is the following. So simply to map what we are going to do in the next quarter of an hour. First, I will give a brief introduction by talking about what is the wildlife in Kazakhstan, how does it look like. We'll talk about some endangered species, what we have in terms of wildlife. I will talk about legal sources of wildlife, so which laws, which legal acts, which normative acts regulate the wildlife protection. Then we'll talk about main terms. Actually, I present only two terms. What does it mean animal world and what does it mean animals? In brief, which animals do we talk about? Then I will be concentrating on two main normative acts, which is law on protection, reproduction, and usage of animal world, and rules on hunting. Then a couple of words about sanctions, and then in terms of conclusion, some challenges which, to my opinion, the legislation of Kazakhstan on wildlife faces. Before I start, I wanted to underline that this presentation is not about animal law in Kazakhstan, and it is not even about wildlife law in Kazakhstan, but it is about a narrower topic, which is wildlife protection law in Kazakhstan. So in my presentation, I will be mostly concentrating on those norms in our Kazakhstani legislation, which deals exactly with protection of animals. And someone may already notice that it is somewhat strange that as animal protection norms, I indicate rules on hunting, which hunting by definition is killing an animal. But later we'll see why it is so and why I'm putting it this way. So this is our Republic of Kazakhstan. The Republic of Kazakhstan has a huge variety of landscapes. Here on my presentation, I put only 4 samples of different landscapes, and I see Timur smiling with nostalgia, maybe looking at these beauties of our country. We have every sort of landscapes in Kazakhstan. Okay, most of it is covered by steppes, but also we have forests on mostly on the north and northeast of Kazakhstan. We have some deserts, quite significant ones. We have lakes, we have rivers, we have quite important mountains. And this variety of landscapes explains also the variety of animal species we have. One may think, well, Kazakhstan is a flat thing where only lizards live. But actually, this is completely not true, because thanks to this variety of climates, the different habitats that we have, the wildlife in Kazakhstan is actually quite rich. The amount of species which you can see is very significant. So only mammals are represented by almost 200 different species. Some of these species which live in Kazakhstan are in so-called red book or red list, which represents then endangered species or species at risk. Nowadays, there are 128 species which are listed as rare and endangered, among which, for instance, Bactrian deer. You know, I'm a university professor, so if I made a stretchable presentation, I can comment on every single slide, and like this, it can last for a couple of days. Otherwise, I will simply outline some important issues, hoping on your questions after my presentation. Bactrian deer, a wonderful animal, which was almost brought to extinction, but now its population is being recovered, but still in the red book. Great bustard, it's important how you pronounce it, and I'm always afraid not to mispronounce, is this wonderful bird, which also lives in Kazakhstan, and its population at a certain point also got decreased because it is a bird which almost doesn't fly, almost like a chicken. So it is very easy to hunt. It is very vulnerable for predators. So at a certain point, again, the population of great bustards decreased, and now it is in red book. The same about manul, which is a wonderful animal, which I like a lot. It is listed as critically endangered in Turkmenistan, and in Kazakhstan is simply endangered. Saiga antelope, this is a particular animal because it actually reproduces in a quite fast way. It reproduces fastly. So sometimes the population, the amount of saigas increases drastically, but then being subject to zoonosis and also to poaching, to illegal hunting, it is also very vulnerable. Sometimes thousands of those animals simply die because of some zoonosis, and being an object of poaching, also they are kept as endangered species in our legislation. Snow leopard, which is also another beautiful animal. You see, I'm concentrated mostly on so-called charismatic species, also to attract your attention to what I'm saying. Also an endangered species in Kazakhstan, there are about 100 snow leopards, and well, it is in the red book. Now about sources. Here I listed the main sources of which regulate wildlife, and you see that it is not an exhaustive list, that is not a complete list, because it finishes with others. It starts with the international conventions, for instance, CITES, which is to which Kazakhstan is a party. Then we have environmental code, as it was mentioned today a couple of times, that we have a fresh baked environmental code of this year. Actually, technically, it is not yet enforced. It comes in force in June of this year, but it is already there. We consider it as current environmental code. Code of administrative offenses and criminal code regulate now obviously punishments in the sphere of wildlife legislation. Law on protection, reproduction, and usage of animal world, rules on hunting, rules on keeping animals in captivity and semi-captivity, and others. I have underlined in bold those normative acts which are the main acts which, to my opinion, regard wildlife protection. Since environmental code is the sort of umbrella normative act, which contains the main principles, the main provisions which regard wildlife, I skip considering it because there is a detailed legislation which is called Law on Protection, Reproduction, and Usage. So I will be further concentrated on this law. It was signed in 2004 and amended. Actually, the last amendments were done in 2019, but they were not really significant. It is actually continuously being amended. Which animals do we talk about? When we say animal, whom do we mean? I mentioned that I participate in drafting of law on responsible treatment of animals. And it is clear that that law does not cover really all animals, because we cannot responsibly treat mosquitoes or I don't know, other sort of invasive animals. But in terms of law on protection, reproduction, and usage, and in terms of wildlife protection law, we look at animals from purely biological perspective. We say that as probably you know, there are three main kingdoms: the kingdom of mushrooms, kingdom of plants, and kingdom of animals, apart from bacteria and viruses. So if something is not a mushroom and is not a plant, it is an animal. More or less in the same way, our legislation on wildlife defines that. So animal world is totality of animals who live permanently or temporarily on the territory of Kazakhstan, as well as those of continental shelf. So totality of animals. Who are animals are all sorts of living organisms which are not mushrooms or plants. They're defined as you see here: mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibia, fish, mollusks, insects, and others. So I honestly, not being a biologist, I cannot even imagine who others who live in the wild, in water, atmosphere, and soil. So we include all animals, and we talk about protection of all animals that there are. My further slides, which I will not comment in detail, again, because of a lack of time, contain the norms which regard protection of animal world. For instance, well, first about the principles that it is indicated in law on protection, reproduction, and usage of animal world, that it guarantees the protection and sustainable use of animals, that the use of animals should exclude cruelty towards animals, and which is an important novelty in our legislation, animals should be treated in accordance with principles of humanity. inevitability or certainty of punishment for the violation of legislation is also there. So my further slides, you see, contain the lists of what should be done in terms of animal protection. I will simply slowly scroll through these slides because there is no time opportunities to comment on all of that. But simply telling as a general comment that the list of norms of limitations in usage of animal world, the list of norms aimed on protection of animals is actually quite long. It is often a tendency in, especially in international conferences and those which we find also in mass media, to complain about our legislation, to tell that something does not work. But actually, so far, I can tell that the norms which regard wildlife protection in Kazakhstan are quite detailed. You see that it regards the ways the animal should be hunted. It regards different other activities which are prohibited because animals should be protected. So, you see even those norms which you see now on the slides, they're very detailed and are aimed purely on protection of animals. Hunting is a type of special, so-called special nature use, special wildlife use. Also, rules on hunting include quite a long list of what can be done or cannot be done in terms of hunting. So you see here a list of methods of means of hunting which cannot be used, which are prohibited. And you see that again, all those norms that you see, on one hand, they are aimed on protection of biodiversity, of landscape, but actually in most of cases, they are aimed purely on protection of animals as themselves, as living beings having intrinsic value, not simply as part of an ecosystem. Sanctions are included both in Code of Administrative Offense and in Criminal Code. I indicated here only some of the sanctions for some of the violations. Violation of state property of animal and plant world, destruction of forest fauna, which deals with forestry law, and others. These are subjects of administrative punishments. Illegal hunting. This norm about illegal hunting has been recently amended 2 years ago in connection with the famous case, which you might have heard about, when a person involved in law enforcement was murdered by poachers. So the punishment for poaching was increased. Violation of rules of protection of animal world, cruel treatment of animals, violation of requirements of usage of animal world, and violation of rules of hunting. So you see that coming to a conclusion that we are that animal protection of wildlife is probably one of the most well-regulated branches of animal law that we have in Kazakhstan. We have a lot of norms which are aimed on protection of wildlife. We have mechanisms of punishment for violation of these norms. And one can tell which can be challenges. This is one of the examples of challenges. What you see here are killed wolves. A team of 7 people, here on the picture they are 8, but the website from which I have taken this picture talked about the group of 7 people who during 1 month of last year killed some more than 50 wolves. One looking at this picture can tell that something something is wrong there. Something is probably morally wrong there. Why, with this highly developed animal protection, wildlife protection legislation, we still have such pictures? Because wolves, in accordance with our legislation, are listed as animals, the population of which should be regulated. As, in other words, as harmful animals. Despite the fact that wolves are listed as harmful animals and that these pictures of this kind are in free access in internet and no punishment expects these people. Last year in 4 oblasts of Kazakhstan, hunting of wolves was prohibited because, as you know, wolves are natural regulators of wildlife in the wild. So obviously there is some problematic issue in that. Summing up, Kazakhstan has a very developed wildlife legislation. However, there are some gaps. For instance, there is no regulation for wildlife rescue and rehabilitation centers. For instance, if during hunting a bear cub remains orphan, or a wolf cub remains orphan, or how it happened several times in my practice, a rare bird would be damaged by hunters and abandoned in wild, and nobody can help that bird because helping to that animal is illegal because of the gap in our legislation. No rehabilitation centers, no rescue missions. Punishment for violation of rules of hunting. 2 years ago, before they strengthened the rules about that, it was really soft. Now they increased it to up to 3 years of imprisonment with confiscation of property. But still, many people consider this too soft to regulate the issue. Law enforcement mechanism isn't perfect. We have laws in place. We have rules which regulate punishment of those laws, but law enforcement mechanism is imperfect. Species of population of which should be regulated problematic, as I mentioned. Wolves go in and out from this list depending on circumstances. And also, strangely, stray dogs are classified as wildlife, which is absolutely a wrong thing. Knowing that I was very brief and I was running through my presentation, that was, by the way, the case of this person murdered by poachers. I thank you for your attention anyway, and I will be grateful for comments, questions.
Thank you, Dr. Badilio. Excellent photography and such an insightful talk. We've got a couple of questions very quickly. Now, for example, are animals in zoo in Kazakhstan protected? Baghdad Alimhankas is asking.
Thank you, Baghdad. Indeed, it is a very interesting question and a very important question, because animals in zoos, well, they are protected, but they are not considered as wildlife any longer. As soon as an animal is extracted from natural habitat by being killed or by being captured, it is no longer regulated by wildlife legislation. It is subject to a different norm. At the beginning of my presentation, I indicated rules on keeping animals in captivity and semi-captivity. Правила содержания животных в неволе полувольных условиях. This is one of the normative acts which regulates, among others, animals kept in zoos. And also we have some additional legislation, but they're not considered as wildlife, which one may find surprising.
The question is there a document that actually regulates that people should or should not have wildlife, especially as pets?
Also a very good question. Again, I see that this is Baghdad's question. There is also a very good question, and there is no such norm. This is what we are trying to introduce in this draft law that I was telling about, that we want to limit pet keep only to certain species. If we look at our rules of keeping pets in different cities, different oblasts of Kazakhstan, we'll see that those rules regard only cats and dogs. So, which results in this paradoxic situation that if I walk a dog, I should walk a dog on a leash with a muzzle, with all the regulations, vaccinations, veterinary passport, and so on. But if I walk a leopard or a crocodile, there are no norms about that. Luckily, there are also not so many cases about such an open demonstration of pet keeping, like walking with a leopard in public. But actually, they are not regulated. There is no prohibition.
Yeah. And there's another question: that what protections actually is there for animals to regulate extremes of weather, like sun and precipitation, flooding?
Mm-hmm.
This is from John Versa.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your question. In law on protection, reproduction, and usage, which I was referring to during my presentation, there is a norm which says that a citizen, well, first of all, there is a prohibition to hunt animals during natural disasters. Even if it is a hunting season, even if you have a license, but during natural disasters, it is prohibited to hunt animals. This is considered as violation of rules on hunting. And also it says that citizens have to help animals who are trying to survive during natural disasters. Honestly, I cannot tell how it works on practice. I don't know if we, if I have to really go somewhere where I know that there are climatic difficulties and whether I'm obliged to. So I don't know how it is logistically happen, but the norm is there.
Maria, there is another excellent question from Brandon Ducre. He's asking whether about the law, the enforcement of law, and if you could comment about the rangers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not many rangers.
Yeah, there are lack of rangers.
With a limitation. Indeed,
sorry, just to clarify what my question is I've been living in Kazakhstan for a few years working here. I'm directing a sustainability research institute. So actually it was a pleasure to meet you and to learn about your work, because I think we may be able to collaborate in the future. But just a question I have is in terms of implementation of the law. So you mentioned that they have really good laws set up here to protect wildlife. But you know, you're faced with a situation where Kazakhstan is an enormous country. You have huge swaths of land that you have to basically have a significant amount of rangers to walk around and to catch people who are poaching. So just a question for you is how can the implementation of these laws be improved, and what would you recommend for that to happen? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Indeed, among the problems of our wildlife protection legislation, I mentioned the implementation or enforcement of that legislation. We have wonderful norms with lists of different prohibitions and obligations. We have norms in administrative and criminal codes on punishment, but the enforcement of those norms remains problematic, because as you mentioned, Brandon, if I may, as you mentioned absolutely correctly, the territory is huge and the amount of rangers is insufficient. I was told, this is an unofficial data, but I see it as plausible, that also salaries are quite low, salaries of rangers. So somebody of them can be enthusiastic as Yerlan Nurgaliyev, who was told to do that for passion. Whereas for others who see it as purely a job, maybe not so interesting. So maybe as a solution, I don't know if I can think now of some sort of panacea for this issue. But I think that increasing of amount of rangers and also maybe increasing of their authority can be a solution. Increasing of their, improving of their working conditions can be also a case. On the other hand, you know, I teach animal law in KIMEP University, and one of my animal law students happened to be a passionate hunter. And he was telling that it is extremely difficult to not to meet a ranger. It seems a step, a complete flat surface, and suddenly once you shoot, they appear from nowhere, simply hearing the noise of shooting.
Yeah, okay, Maria, there is one quick question about the regulation of protection of wild animals during infrastructure projects. For example, when a new highway is being constructed. Can you comment on that, please?
Thank you again for the question. In fact, in our law on protection, reproduction, usage, and also in environmental code, there is a requirement to take into account when constructing buildings, when constructing roads, when making an infrastructure, when putting pipelines, to take into account the needs of animals and to take into account their migration routes, which, as it is understood around the world, if a highway, for instance, crosses a migration route of an animal, they should be constructed either underground or a bridge above the highway, which lets the animals to cross it. For now, I am not aware of any of such projects that were implemented. I have seen only the projects, and also I know that there are architectures among in our audience. I saw the projects, the digital pictures, but I'm unaware of any actually implemented project.
It's such an interesting talk. We've got two last questions. One from Dr. Park. She's asking whether habitat approach is implemented. For example, when species are protected rather than individual animals.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dr. Park. In fact, the general approach, the overall traditional approach of our legislation is a so-called anthropocentric approach, or in some cases, in the case of environmental legislation, is ecocentric approach. This new animal-centric approach, which is concentrated on purely protection of animals as such, is very new, is something we are introducing now with this draft law I'm working on. But the general approach is actually the one of habitats, of ecosystem, or anthropocentric approach.
Thank you.
And one more question from Dr. Saxena, yes?
Yes, thank you, Timur. Thank you, Maria. It was absolutely brilliant. Learning so much and discussing so much to discuss. I just wanted to quickly actually say a comment about what Brendan raised regarding the large territory and implementation and so on. That discussion is very, very important. As you probably know, that there is now an initiative for digital rangers, right? Deploying other means of digital monitoring and surveillance and so on. And so while that's going on, but I'm not sure in the new law that you're addressing, would you then address the evidence taken from digital sources like that, how would that be used if there's any violation and persecution? So inclusion of digital evidence, as it will become more prevalent as we move forward, is a small question I had. But I had a bigger question, which perhaps requires a talk in itself. I just wondered, one of the big aspects of hunting, which is very visible, as you said, charismatic characters, is the falconry, and that hunting aspect, which has both the traditional part of the story, which has how the foreigners can come to Kazakhstan and legislation around that. It has also the phytosanitary aspects of bringing animals into the country and taking them out, and also the historical aspect of how it was dealt with in the Soviet period and what happened both in the after the Soviet collapse. So it's a topic that interests me much, but whatever you can tell me about it would be very interesting.
In accordance with, thank you for your question. In general, I thank you so much for all the questions which I see also in chat, which means that there is an interest to the topic. With regards to falconry, I can tell that in our law on protection, reproduction, and usage, which I keep referring to, and also in rules of hunting, there is a particular category of hunting which is called traditional hunting. I think traditional hunting, that is the term they use, which includes falconry and also hunting with traditional hunting dogs, which are tazi, a traditional breed of hunting dogs, which are used in Kazakhstan. So they are regulated in our legislation. They are mentioned, they are described as types of hunting which is using those animals. But for the rest, it should obey the general rules of hunting. It has the same limitations, the same prohibitions, the same just the same regulations as hunting with a fire gun.
Right. Maria, do we have 1 minute for a last question? Is there a legal requirement to bring in certain types of pets? To bring in, meaning where? All right, if you have something to say on that.
To bring in, meaning to import.
Okay.
Well, to import pets
into the country, yeah.
Obviously, there are rules. I stopped for a while because I don't know from which part to start. Obviously, there are customs rules. There are rules of customs union within Eurasian Economic Union, which deal with all the cross-border transfer of live animals. There are veterinary regulations which are listed in our law on veterinary medicine, which in brief, to describe in brief, indicate that the proper documentation should be provided, that the origin of animals should be clear. Also, it depends on species, because in accordance with our legislation, if it is endangered or rare species, they cannot be simply imported or kept by natural persons without special permission of local authorities. With regards to animals which or who are not endangered, then only those veterinary norms which confirm that it does not have illnesses and the origin of that animal is legal.
Right, I think it's time to wrap, and I would like to thank you so much for all contributions and discussions. Brilliant session, and with almost 15 minutes over, that says a lot how such collaborations are needed in this time, and hopefully in the future we'll have this more between KIMEP and Cambridge, and ideally offline as well. And we've covered really such topical issues, eco-activism and grassroots movements, renewed policy game in Central Asia, and latest trends in animal protection. So this has been a great discussion. You can follow Cambridge Central Asia Forum on social media channels, such as Facebook and Instagram. You can also Google Cambridge Central Asia Forum to find out its website and to stay tuned about future events. So thank you so much for all contributions and discussions. Okay, we can stop recording, right, Dr. Sasana?